You know, I've lived a long life, 97 years on this earth, and I've seen things that would make most folks lose sleep for the rest of their days. But there's one moment that still visits me in the quiet hours of the night. One moment that changed everything I thought I knew about courage, about fear, and about what it really means to be a man. My name is James Callahan, though the boys in my unit called me Jack. I was born in 1923 in a little town called Millbrook, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. My father worked at the shipyard, and my mother taught piano lessons to the neighborhood children. We weren't rich, but we had enough. We had love. We had Sunday dinners with mashed potatoes and gravy. We had a front porch where my grandfather would sit and tell me stories about the Great War, stories I never thought I'd have to live myself. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, I was 18 years old, working at a hardware store and saving up money for college. That dream died on December 7th. By January, I had enlisted in the United States Army, and by the summer of 1944, I found myself standing on the deck of a transport ship, watching the grey waters of the English Channel churn beneath me, knowing that somewhere beyond that horizon, a war was waiting for me. But nothing, not the training at Fort Benning, not the lectures about German tactics, not the letters from home telling me to be brave, nothing prepared me for what happened on a cold November morning in the Hurtgen forest. Nothing prepared me for the moment when the Germans advanced and my weapon jammed. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It helps more than you know, and there's plenty more stories where this one came from. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, the Hurtgen Forest. They called it the Death Factory, and let me tell you, that name wasn't given lightly. The Hurtgen was 50 square miles of dense, dark forest that straddled the German-Belgian border. The trees were so thick that sunlight barely touched the ground. The terrain was a nightmare. Steep ravines, muddy trails that sucked at your boots, and everywhere you looked, the twisted remnants of what had once been a peaceful woodland. By the time my unit arrived in early November of 1944, the forest had already claimed thousands of American lives. We were part of the 28th Infantry Division, and our orders were simple: push through the forest, capture the German-held towns on the other side, and open a path for the Allied advance into Germany. Simple orders, but nothing about the Hurtgen was simple. I remember the first morning we entered the forest. The air was cold enough to see your breath, and a thin layer of frost covered everything. The fallen leaves, the branches, even the mud. Our platoon leader was a lieutenant named Thomas Brennan, a tall, serious man from Ohio who had already seen action in Normandy. He gathered us together at the edge of the tree line and spoke in a low voice. "Listen up," he said. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The Germans know this forest better than we do. They've had months to prepare their defenses. There are pillboxes, machine gun nests, artillery positions, and enough mines to blow us all to kingdom come. Stay alert, stay together, and for God's sake, watch where you step." I looked around at the faces of my fellow soldiers. Most of them were young, like me, boys of 19, 20, 21, who had grown up dreaming of baseball games and Saturday night dances, not mortar fire and rifle pits. There was Eddie Sullivan, my best friend from basic training, a red-haired kid from Brooklyn who could make anyone laugh even in the darkest moments. There was Samuel "Sam" Washington, a quiet, strong man from Alabama who never talked about his family, but always carried a worn photograph of them in his pocket. There was Michael Torres, a Mexican-American from Texas, who had fought discrimination his whole life and was now fighting for a country that didn't always treat him fairly. And there was Private First Class Henry Miller, the youngest of us all at just 18, who still had pimples on his face and fear in his eyes that he tried desperately to hide. We moved into the forest in a staggered column, our rifles at the ready, our eyes scanning every shadow. The silence was oppressive. In the distance, we could hear the occasional thump of artillery, but here, in the depths of the trees, everything was muffled, deadened. It felt like walking into a tomb. "I don't like this," Eddie whispered beside me. "It's too quiet." "Keep your voice down," I hissed back. But I knew what he meant. The forest felt wrong. It felt like it was watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. We marched for hours, stopping occasionally to check our maps and coordinates. The terrain was disorienting. Every tree looked the same. Every trail seemed to lead in circles. By midday, we had covered less than 2 miles, and already several men had twisted their ankles in the treacherous undergrowth. It was around 3 in the afternoon when we found the first bodies. They were American soldiers, probably from a unit that had come through days before. There were 5 of them, lying in a small clearing, their uniforms torn and bloodied, their faces frozen in expressions of surprise and pain. One of them was still clutching his rifle. Another had a rosary wrapped around his fingers. Lieutenant Brennan ordered us to keep moving. "We can't do anything for them now," he said, his voice tight. "Graves' registration will come through later. Our job is to keep pushing forward." But I couldn't stop looking at those men. They could have been us. They probably were us just a few days ago, laughing, complaining about the cold, writing letters home to their sweethearts. And now they were nothing but empty shells, their souls gone to wherever souls go when they leave this world. Henry Miller was standing next to me, his face pale. "Jack," he whispered, "I'm scared." I put my hand on his shoulder. "We all are, kid. But we're going to get through this. Together." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. To be honest, I had the same doubt in my heart, but I couldn't show it. Not to him, not to any of them. We made camp that night in a shallow ravine, digging foxholes into the frozen earth and covering them with branches and leaves for camouflage. The temperature dropped well below freezing, and we huddled together for warmth, our breath forming little clouds in the darkness. Eddie pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes and offered one to me. I took it gratefully, letting the smoke warm my lungs for a brief moment. "You know what I miss most?" Eddie said, staring up at the sliver of sky visible through the trees. "My mother's cooking, her pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Man, I could eat a whole cow right now." "I miss baseball," Sam said from his foxhole nearby. "Used to play every Saturday with my brothers. We weren't any good, but it didn't matter. It was just fun, you know?" "I miss dancing," Torres added. "There was this girl back home, Maria. We'd go to the dance hall every Friday night. She had this smile that could light up a room." "You guys are killing me," I said, laughing softly. "I miss my mother's piano playing. She'd play every evening after dinner. Chopin, Beethoven, sometimes just simple folk songs. The house always smelled like coffee and music." We sat in silence for a while, each of us lost in our memories, our little pieces of home that we carried with us into this nightmare. "We're going to make it back," Eddie said finally. "All of us. And when we do, I'm going to eat so much pot roast that I won't be able to move for a week." "And I'm going to marry Maria," Torres said. "First thing I do when I get home." "And I'm going to play the best game of baseball you've ever seen," Sam added. I smiled, but deep down, I wondered how many of us would actually make it home, how many of those promises would ever be kept. The next few days were a blur of marching, fighting, and surviving. We encountered German patrols twice, brief, violent skirmishes that left 3 of our men wounded, and who knows how many Germans fallen. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees becoming our enemies as much as the Germans. Artillery shells would explode in the canopy above, sending deadly splinters of wood raining down on us like shrapnel. Snipers would pick off men who strayed too far from cover. And the mines, they were everywhere, hidden beneath the leaves, waiting to claim their next victim. On the 5th day, we reached a small ridge overlooking a German-held village called Vossenack. Lieutenant Brennan gathered us together and laid out the plan. Intelligence says there's a German machine gun position at the edge of the village, he explained, pointing at a crude map. It's been cutting down every unit that tries to approach from this direction. Our job is to take it out. First squad will provide covering fire, while second squad flanks from the left. Third squad, that's you, Jack, will advance through the center and assault the position directly. My heart sank. The center. That meant we'd be walking straight into the line of fire. Sir, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, that's a pretty exposed approach. Shouldn't we wait for artillery support? Brennan shook his head. Artillery is committed elsewhere. We're on our own for this one. I know it's not ideal, but we don't have a choice. That machine gun has to go. I looked at Eddie, Sam, Torres, and Henry, my squad. They were all looking at me, waiting for me to say something to give them some kind of hope. All right, I said finally. We'll do it. But we go slow and steady, no heroics. We stick together and watch each other's backs. They nodded, their faces grim, but determined. The assault began at dawn the next morning. The sky was grey and overcast, the air thick with the smell of smoke and decay. First and second squads moved into position, while my squad crouched at the tree line, waiting for the signal. When Brennan's whistle blew, all hell broke loose. The machine gun opened up immediately, its distinctive chatter echoing through the forest. Bullets tore through the trees around us, sending bark and splinters flying. I could hear men shouting orders, calling out in fear and determination. Move! 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 I yelled, pushing forward through the underbrush. Eddie was on my right, Sam on my left, Torres and Henry close behind. We ran in short bursts, diving behind trees and fallen logs, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. The machine gun swept back and forth, a relentless wave of danger. I saw one of the men from first squad go down, clutching his leg. Another fell forward and didn't get up. "Keep going!" I shouted. "We're almost there." We covered another 50 yards, then another. The machine gun position was just ahead, a sandbagged bunker with a narrow firing slit. I could see the barrel of the gun flashing as it fired. "Grenades!" I ordered. "On my count!" Eddie, Sam, and Torres pulled out their grenades, ready to throw. 1, 2, 3... We threw our grenades simultaneously, then hit the dirt. 4 explosions erupted around the bunker, showering us with dirt and debris. For a moment, the machine gun fell silent. "Now!" I yelled. "Rush them!" We surged forward, our rifles at the ready. But as we closed the distance, the machine gun roared back to life. The explosions had only temporarily stunned the crew, not eliminated them. I raised my M1 Garand and squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. I squeezed again. Still nothing. My rifle had jammed. Time seemed to slow down. I looked down at my weapon, saw the stuck cartridge, felt a cold wave of terror wash over me. The Germans were advancing now, pouring out of the bunker, their rifles and submachine guns blazing. And I was standing there, helpless, with a useless piece of metal in my hands. "Jack! Get down!" Eddie screamed. A German soldier appeared in front of me, his rifle raised, his finger on the trigger. I could see his face. Young, probably no older than me, with pale blue eyes and a scar on his chin. For a split second, we just stared at each other, 2 boys from different worlds, caught up in a war that neither of us had asked for. Then Eddie's rifle cracked, and the German fell. "Jack, move!" Eddie grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a fallen tree. Bullets whizzed past us, close enough that I could feel the displacement of air on my face. "My rifle jammed!" I gasped. "I can't—" "Here!" Eddie shoved his own rifle into my hands and pulled out his pistol. "Use mine, I'll cover you." I didn't have time to argue. More Germans were coming, and if we didn't take out that machine gun, we were all finished. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and started firing. Eddie's rifle felt different in my hands. The weight was wrong, the balance unfamiliar, but it worked. That was all that mattered. One German went down, then another. Sam and Torres were firing from behind a pile of rocks, their bullets finding their targets. Henry, to my surprise, had crawled up to within a few feet of the bunker and was shoving a grenade through the firing slit. "Fire in the hole!" he screamed. The explosion was deafening. The machine gun went silent. For a moment there was nothing but smoke and dust and the ringing in my ears. Then, slowly, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by the moans of the wounded and the crackling of small fires. We had done it. We had taken the position. But the cost was high. When I looked around, I saw the bodies of our fallen comrades scattered across the field. Too many. Far too many. And then I saw Eddie. He was lying on his back behind the fallen tree, his hand pressed against his stomach. Blood was seeping through his fingers, dark and wet. "Eddie!" I dropped beside him, my heart pounding. "Medic! We need a medic over here!" "It's okay, Jack," Eddie said, his voice weak. "It's okay." "No, it's not okay. You're going to be fine. Just hang on." "The medic's coming." Eddie smiled, that same crooked smile he always had, the one that could make anyone laugh even in the darkest moments. "Remember what I said," he whispered. "About the pot roast?" "Don't talk," I said. "Save your strength." "I want you to have it," he continued, ignoring me. "When you get home, go to my mother's house, tell her I love her, and eat that pot roast for me. Promise?" Tears were streaming down my face. "I promise, Eddie. I promise." Meekly, he reached up and touched my cheek. "You're a good man, Jack. Don't ever forget that." And then his hand fell, and his eyes went still, and my best friend was gone. I don't know how long I sat there, holding Eddie's body. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Sam had to physically pull me away when the medics finally arrived. "He's gone, Jack," Sam said gently. "There's nothing more you can do." "It should have been me," I whispered. "He gave me his rifle. He saved my life." "It should have been me." "Don't think like that," Sam said. "Eddie made a choice. He chose to save his friend. That's who he was. Honor that." I looked at Sam, this quiet, strong man who had seen so much, lost so much, and I saw a wisdom in his eyes that I couldn't understand. Not then. Not yet. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you keep going when everything falls apart?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think about the people I'm fighting for, my family, my community. I think about the world I want to leave behind for my children, and I tell myself that every step I take, every battle I fight, is one step closer to that world." Eddie knew that too. He didn't fall for nothing, Jack. He fell so that you could live, so that all of us could live. Don't waste that gift. I thought about Sam's words as we regrouped and continued our advance. I thought about them as we fought our way through the rest of the Hürtgen forest, losing more men to mines and bullets and the bitter cold. I thought about them on the long march into Germany as the war ground toward its bloody conclusion. And I'm still thinking about them now, more than 70 years later. The rest of the war is a blur in my memory, a patchwork of battles, faces, moments of terror, and moments of unexpected beauty. I remember crossing the Rhine on a pontoon bridge, watching the German countryside unfold before us. I remember the liberation of a small town where the people came out of their homes and wept with joy, throwing flowers at us like we were conquering heroes instead of exhausted, traumatized boys. I remember VE Day, when the news came that Germany had surrendered, and we stood in the middle of a bombed-out city and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But mostly, I remember the men I served with. I remember Sam, who made it home and became a high school teacher in Alabama, dedicating his life to educating the next generation. I remember Torres, who married his Maria just like he said he would, and raised 5 children on a little ranch in Texas. I remember Henry Miller, who overcame his fear and became one of the bravest soldiers I ever knew. He stayed in the army after the war and eventually became a colonel. And I remember Eddie, my friend, my brother-in-arms, the man who gave me his rifle when mine jammed and paid for it with his life. After the war, I went home to Massachusetts. I married a beautiful woman named Grace, who I met at a dance hall in Boston. We had 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and now I have 4 great-grandchildren who think of me as that old guy who tells long stories about the war. But the stories aren't boring, not to me. They're the most important stories I have to tell. Because here's what I learned in that forest on that cold November morning when my weapon jammed and the Germans advanced. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid. Being terrified, actually, and doing what needs to be done anyway. Courage is looking out for your friends, even when it costs you everything. Courage is getting back up after you've been knocked down, again and again, until you can't get up anymore. Eddie had that courage. Sam had it. Torres and Henry had it. And somewhere deep inside, I had it too, even if I didn't know it until my rifle jammed and I had to find another way to keep fighting. I kept my promise to Eddie. A few months after I got home, I took a train to Brooklyn and found his mother's house. She was a small woman with grey hair and Eddie's same crooked smile. When I told her who I was, she started crying and pulled me into a hug that lasted forever. "He wrote about you in his letters," she said. "He said you were the best friend he ever had." I couldn't speak. The words stuck in my throat like a stone. She led me into the kitchen and sat me down at the table. And then she brought out the pot roast, the same pot roast that Eddie had dreamed about in that frozen foxhole, and she watched me eat every last bite. "He would have wanted this," she said softly. "He would have wanted you to have this." I never forgot that meal. I never forgot the taste of those carrots and potatoes, the warmth of that gravy, the love that had gone into every bite. It wasn't just food. It was a gift, a connection, a way of honoring the sacrifice that Eddie had made. Over the years, I've been asked many times what it was like to fight in the war. People want to know about the battles, the strategies, the famous generals. They want to know if I ever had to take a life, if I was ever wounded, if I have nightmares. I tell them the truth. Yes, I did what I had to do in combat. Yes, I was wounded, a piece of shrapnel in my left leg that still aches when it rains. Yes, I have nightmares. Even now, at 97 years old, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, my hands reaching for a rifle that isn't there. But I also tell them about the other things, the friendships that were forged in the crucible of combat, the moments of kindness and compassion that somehow survived amid all the horror. The letters from home that we read and reread until they fell apart, the songs we sang to keep our spirits up, the jokes we told to make each other laugh. War is terrible. There's no other word for it. But within that terrible thing, there are moments of grace, moments of humanity, moments that remind you why you're fighting in the first place. I think about Eddie a lot these days. I wonder what his life would have been like if he had survived. Would he have gotten married, had children, become a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather like me? I'll never know the answers to those questions. But I do know this. Eddie didn't fall in vain. He fell so that I could live. He fell so that the world could be free from tyranny. He fell so that future generations would never have to experience the horrors that we experienced. That's why I tell these stories. That's why I go to schools and churches and community centers, even though my legs don't work as well as they used to and my hearing isn't what it was. Because the boys who didn't come home, Eddie and thousands like him, they deserve to be remembered. Their sacrifices deserve to be honored, and their courage deserves to inspire others. The Hurtgen Forest is a quiet place now. The trees have grown back, the bunkers have crumbled, the shell holes have filled in with earth and leaves. If you walk through that forest today, you might never know that one of the bloodiest battles of the war was fought there. But I know, and I remember. I remember the cold. I remember the fear. I remember the moment when my weapon jammed and I thought I was going to meet my end right there. And I remember Eddie pressing his rifle into my hands, giving me a chance to keep fighting, giving me a chance to live. That's what courage looks like. That's what sacrifice means. And that's why I'm still here, telling this story 79 years later. So the next time you find yourself facing something difficult, something that seems impossible, something that makes you want to give up, I want you to remember this story. Remember Eddie Sullivan, the kid from Brooklyn with the crooked smile who gave his life for his friend. Remember Sam Washington, who kept fighting because he believed in a better world. Remember Michael Torres, who overcame discrimination and prejudice to serve his country with honor. Remember Henry Miller, who found his courage when he needed it most. And remember me, Jack Callahan, the old man who almost fell in a forest in Germany, but didn't. The old man who kept his promise to eat that pot roast. The old man who has spent his whole life trying to live up to the sacrifice that his best friend made, because that's what we owe to those who didn't come home. We owe them our lives. We owe them our freedom. We owe them our best effort every single day to build the kind of world they gave everything for, and we owe them our memory. As long as we remember them, they're never truly gone. Now, I want to tell you about what happened after that battle, the days that followed and the lessons they taught me. Because the war didn't end that day in November. It kept going, grinding forward, taking more lives, leaving more scars. And I had to find a way to keep going too. After we took that machine gun position, we were given a few hours to rest and regroup. I sat against a tree, staring at the sky, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Eddie's passing was still fresh, still raw, a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Sam came over and sat down beside me. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, his presence solid and comforting. "You know," he finally said, "back home in Alabama, we have this tradition. When someone passes, we don't just mourn them, we celebrate them. We tell stories about their lives, about the good things they did, about the people they loved. We keep them alive through our words." I turned to look at him. "Is that what you do for the men we've lost?" Sam nodded. "Every night, before I go to sleep, I say their names, all of them. I remember their faces, their voices, their dreams. It's my way of honoring them." "Does it help?" I asked. Sam thought about it for a moment. "It helps me remember why I'm fighting. It helps me feel connected to something bigger than myself. But does it take away the pain?" He shook his head. "No, nothing takes away the pain. You just learn to carry it." I thought about that for a long time. Learning to carry the pain. It sounded impossible. But over the days and weeks that followed, I began to understand what Sam meant. The pain didn't go away. It was always there, a constant weight in my chest. But I learned to carry it. I learned to put one foot in front of the other, to do my job, to look out for the men beside me. And slowly, gradually, I began to find meaning in the midst of the madness. We pushed deeper into Germany as winter set in. The cold was brutal. Temperatures well below freezing, snow and ice everywhere, wind that cut through our uniforms like a knife. We lost men to frostbite, to pneumonia, to the simple, cruel mathematics of survival. But we also had moments of unexpected warmth. I remember one night, huddled in a bombed-out farmhouse, when Torres pulled out a harmonica he had found somewhere and started playing. He wasn't very good, his fingers were numb, and the notes came out shaky and uncertain, but none of that mattered. For a few minutes, we weren't soldiers in a war zone. We were just a group of friends listening to music, remembering what it felt like to be human. "My grandfather taught me to play," Torres said when he finished. "He used to say that music was the language of the soul. No matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, music can reach you." "Play another one," Henry said. He was sitting in the corner, his rifle across his lap, his young face illuminated by the flickering light of a candle. Torres smiled and started playing again, a slow, melancholy tune that seemed to echo all the sadness and longing we were feeling. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. For a moment, I was back home in Massachusetts, sitting on my mother's front porch, listening to her play piano through the open window. When the song ended, no one spoke. We just sat there in the darkness, connected by something that went beyond words. That's one of the things they don't tell you about war, the way it can bring people together. Yes, it tears us apart. It destroys families, communities, entire nations, but it also creates bonds that are unbreakable. The men I served with weren't just my comrades, they were my brothers. We had seen each other at our worst and our best. We had shared our fears, our hopes, our deepest secrets. We had saved each other's lives. Those bonds have lasted a lifetime. Even now, with most of my old unit gone, I still feel connected to them. I carry them with me just as Sam taught me, their names, their faces, their stories. There's another moment from the war that I need to tell you about. It happened in January of 1945, during the final push into Germany. We'd been advancing for days, fighting through town after town, village after village. The Germans were in retreat, but they weren't giving up easily. Every step forward came at a cost. One afternoon, we came across a small hamlet that had been devastated by the fighting. Most of the buildings were in ruins, their walls blackened by fire, their roofs collapsed. Bodies lay in the streets, German soldiers mostly, but also civilians. Old men, women, children. I had seen loss before. I had become numb to it, or so I thought. But something about this scene broke through my defenses. Maybe it was the children. There were 3 of them, lying in a row beside what had once been a house. They couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. I stopped in the middle of the street and couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work. My lungs wouldn't work. I just stood there, staring at those small, still bodies, feeling something inside me shatter. Lieutenant Brennan appeared beside me. He looked at the children, then looked at me. "Come on, Jack," he said quietly. "There's nothing we can do here." "Who did this?" I managed to say. "Who caused this?" Brennan was silent for a moment. "Does it matter? War takes everyone eventually. That's what it does." "It matters to me," I said. "It matters." Brennan put his hand on my shoulder. "I know it does. That's what makes you a good soldier, Jack. You still care. Don't ever lose that." We moved on, leaving the hamlet behind. But I never forgot those children. I still see them in my dreams sometimes, their small faces, their closed eyes, their hands reaching for a safety that never came. That was the moment I truly understood what we were fighting for. Not glory, not territory, not political ideals. We were fighting so that children everywhere, in America, in Germany, in all the corners of the world, could grow up without fear. We were fighting for their future. The war ended a few months later. When we heard the news of Germany's surrender, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired. Bone-deep, soul-weary tired. And relieved. Relieved that it was finally over. Relieved that I had survived. Relieved that I could finally go home. The journey home was long. It took weeks to process all the soldiers who were being shipped back to America. I spent most of that time in a replacement depot in France, waiting for my name to be called. During those weeks, I had a lot of time to think. I thought about everything I had experienced, the battles, the losses, the moments of terror, and the moments of grace. I thought about the man I had been before the war, and the man I had become. They were not the same person. Before the war, I had been a naive kid from Massachusetts who thought he understood the world. I thought I knew what courage meant, what sacrifice meant, what love meant. But I didn't. Not really. Not until I had experienced them firsthand. The war taught me that courage isn't a feeling, it's a choice. It's the choice to keep going when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to stop. It's the choice to protect the people beside you, even when it puts your own life at risk. It's the choice to hold on to your humanity, even in the midst of inhuman conditions. The war also taught me about loss. Before the war, I had never lost anyone close to me. My grandparents had passed, but they were old, and their passings felt natural, expected. Losing Eddie was different. Losing the other men in my unit was different. These were young men, full of life and potential, who had everything to live for. Their losses felt wrong, unfair, unjust. But here's what I learned. Loss doesn't have to destroy you. It can transform you. It can make you stronger, more compassionate, more appreciative of the time you have. Every day I've lived since the war has been a gift that I owe to the men who didn't come home, and I've tried to honor that gift by living the best life I can. When I finally got back to Massachusetts, my mother was waiting for me at the train station. She was older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her face more lined, but her eyes were the same, warm and loving and filled with tears. She didn't say anything. She just pulled me into her arms and held me tight. And for the first time since Eddie passed, I let myself cry. We stood there on that platform for what felt like hours, holding each other, crying together, all the pain, all the grief, all the fear that I had been carrying for so long. It came pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. "Welcome home, Jack," my mother finally whispered. "Welcome home." Those words meant more to me than I can ever express. Home. After everything I had been through, I was finally home. The years that followed were not easy. I had nightmares almost every night, vivid, terrifying dreams that would jolt me awake, my heart pounding, my body drenched in sweat. I had trouble adjusting to civilian life, trouble connecting with people who hadn't experienced what I had experienced. I felt isolated, alone, disconnected from the world around me. They didn't have a name for it back then, but now they call it post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of us came home with it. A lot of us struggled with it for the rest of our lives. But I was lucky. I had people who helped me through it. My mother, who was patient and understanding, who never pushed me to talk, but was always there when I was ready. My father, who had served in the Great War and understood what I was going through in a way that few others could. And eventually Grace, my beautiful, wonderful Grace, who saw the broken man I was and loved me anyway. I met Grace at a dance hall in Boston in the summer of 1946. She was wearing a yellow dress and laughing at something her friend had said. When she laughed, her whole face lit up. I couldn't take my eyes off her. I worked up the courage to ask her to dance. She said yes, and from that moment on we were inseparable. Grace didn't try to fix me. She didn't try to make me forget what I had been through. She just accepted me, all of me, including the broken parts. She listened when I needed to talk. She held me when I needed to be held. She gave me space when I needed to be alone. Most importantly, she helped me see that there was still beauty in the world. After everything I had witnessed, I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that the sun still rose every morning, that flowers still bloomed in spring, that children still laughed and played and dreamed of the future. Grace reminded me of all those things. She brought me back to life. We got married in the spring of 1948. It was a small ceremony, just family and a few close friends, but it was perfect. As I stood at the altar, watching Grace walk toward me in her white dress, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope for the future. Hope for our lives together. Hope that maybe, just maybe, all the suffering had been worth it. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Michael, named after Torres, Samuel, named after Sam Washington, and Elizabeth, named after Grace's grandmother. They grew up healthy and happy, never knowing the horrors that their father had experienced. And that was exactly what I wanted. I had fought so that they could live in a world without war. And for the most part, they did. Of course, there were other wars. Korea, Vietnam, all the conflicts that followed. Each one broke my heart a little more. Each one reminded me that humanity never seems to learn, that we keep making the same mistakes over and over again. but I also saw progress. I saw the civil rights movement, the expansion of freedom and equality to people who had been denied it for too long. I saw the space race, humanity reaching for the stars. I saw technology transforming our lives in ways that we never could have imagined. And I saw my children and grandchildren growing up in a world that, despite all its flaws, was better than the one I had known. That gave me hope. That still gives me hope. I'm 97 years old now. Most of my old unit is gone. Sam passed away about 10 years ago, peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. Torres went a few years after that. Henry is still alive, but he's in a nursing home in Virginia, his mind clouded by dementia. When I visit him, he doesn't always recognize me. But sometimes, in his more lucid moments, he'll look at me and smile. "Hey, Jack," he'll say, "remember that time in the Hurtgen?" And I'll nod and say, "I remember, Henry. I remember." Grace passed away 3 years ago. We were married for 68 years. 68 years of love, laughter, joy, and sorrow. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever experienced, harder even than losing Eddie. But I know she's waiting for me somewhere, just as I know Eddie is waiting too. I don't have much time left. I can feel it, the slowness in my bones, the heaviness in my chest, but I'm not afraid. I've lived a good life. I've loved and been loved. I've done my best to honor the sacrifices of the men who didn't come home. And I've told my stories. That's the most important thing. As long as the stories survive, the men who lived them will never be forgotten. So let me leave you with this. If there's one thing I want you to take away from everything I've told you, it's this: life is precious. Every single moment of it. Every sunrise, every sunset, every laugh, every tear. Don't take any of it for granted. I've seen what happens when life is cut short. I've seen young men with everything ahead of them struck down in an instant. I've seen families torn apart, communities destroyed, dreams shattered. And I've learned that the only thing that truly matters is the time we have with the people we love. So hold your loved ones close. Tell them how much they mean to you. Don't waste time on petty arguments or foolish grudges. Life is too short for that. And remember the men who gave their lives so that you could live yours. Remember Eddie Sullivan, who gave his rifle to save his friend. Remember all the soldiers, American, British, French, Russian, and yes, even German, who were caught up in that terrible war and never came home. They were someone's son, someone's brother, someone's friend. They had hopes and dreams just like you. They deserve to be remembered. My name is James Callahan. My friends called me Jack. I was born in 1923 in Millbrook, Massachusetts. I served in the United States Army during World War II. I fought in the Hurtgen Forest. I was there when the Germans advanced and my weapon jammed, and I survived, not because I was stronger or braver than anyone else, but because I had friends who watched my back, who gave their lives so that I could keep living mine. That's the story I've carried with me for 79 years. That's the story I'll carry with me until my last breath. And now it's your story too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering, and God bless you all.